Hello and welcome to the Essential Property Podcast with your hosts, Paul Samuda and Amanda Woodward. With 45 years of combined experience in the world of property buying, selling, investing and developing, they are here to share with you their knowledge in the Stoke-on-Trent, Newcastle-under-Lyme and Crewe property market. Let's get started.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Essential Property Podcast. Today we are doing a quick recap episode. It's April 2025 and there's a lot going on both nationally and internationally that we feel like we would like to update our listeners on. So we're going to be talking about what's happening over in the US, how that affects the UK markets and the UK property markets, what landlords can expect going forward. And as if we haven't had enough new legislation, we have some more to grapple with anti-money laundering and a few other bits and pieces. So a quick recap to keep you updated and informed. Over to you, Paul.
Yeah, as you said, Amanda, it's a funny time for our listeners. You remember a few months ago, I think it was probably either just before Christmas or just after Christmas, we did an episode talking about how politics affects, or if politics affects, the property market. And I think the message we sent was, yes, more and more, whereas days or years and decades gone by didn't so much, unless some particular legislation came in. But now you see situations that happen overseas, which have a direct impact on our economy. And if it affects our economy, it affects the property market. So what we've seen, obviously, new US president has his ideas in terms of the global economy. What has that meant for us? It's probably made the Bank of England, for sure, a little bit uncertain in terms of what they need to do. The market is still pricing in 2 to 3 rate cuts this year, but they're really just guessing. I think one is a certainty. Anything more than that, they can't say. The suggestion is we might get a quarter point rate cut in May. But the challenge that we have is that all this tariff chatter is pushing up, or could push up, inflation. Bank of England, Federal Reserve doesn't know how much and when. And stock market hates uncertainty. Us as landlords hate uncertainty. So those of us who have been waiting to refinance our mortgages as we have are sort of left in a bit of a quandary in terms of either capital tied up or still on high interest rates for our mortgages, and not too sure whether we take the 6% to 5-year fixed on offer, or whether we hold out for maybe another 0.5% rate cut over the next few months, which might save us a little bit more long term. I mean, obviously, the bigger the mortgage, the more it costs to hold. I mean, some landlords don't have mortgages, and obviously they are in a great position. So that level of uncertainty in the market, I mean, there's some things happening. We're with some people at the weekend who represent the NRLA in Wales, and they were just talking about the things that are happening in Wales. There's some things happening in Scotland around short stay rentals and rent caps and things like that. And whilst we don't have that yet in England, it's a bit of a glimpse in the future of what potentially could happen. There was a episode on a podcast that I was listening to where they were discussing the sort of conversations the Scottish Parliament were having around rentals and their equivalent of our Renters' Rights Act. And one of the MPs suggested that if a tenant was evicted illegally by a landlord, that landlord should get 2 years in prison. Now, we may smile or laugh at that, but this was said in Parliament. And so you have to take it seriously. Not that it's going to end up being like that, but in terms of the view of landlords. And I'm surprised every day at the negative view of landlords in terms of owning property, renting property, and trying to earn a living. So we're still in a very toxic environment. We're still in an uncertain environment. It's difficult to make decisions, whether you have mortgages, looking to purchase, looking to refinance. And that's never a nice situation to be in, never a nice situation to be in. I mean, some other legislation coming up, and before I touch on that, Amanda might want to say a few words just in terms of her view and generally what's going on. Oh, she's nodding her head. No, she doesn't. Okay, so the next thing, we know we have the renters' rights bill coming through. We think late spring in the summer. Lots and lots of changes. It's. I see articles to say that it might harm the property market. It might harm the renter. I think that's already happened. I think the volume of landlords that have sold for numerous reasons, not just renters' rights, but that might have been the straw that broke the camel's back. So, but by the same token, I speak to people every day that are still buying the market, still thinking long term, and our view is that you should take a long term view on property. The property market is just not. It's not the same term as your fixed mortgage. It's been around for thousands of years and doing very well, and it always goes up and to the right. So from that standpoint, if you're a long-term investor, then good on you. If there's some short-term pressures which you have to react to, then totally understandable what that situation is. But I think going forward, one of the things that is coming over the next month or so, along with the renters' rights, is change in anti-money laundering. This government and multiple governments, not just here in the UK, but around the world, are really looking to clamp down on anti-money laundering. I can't quite understand why they start with the low-hanging fruit, like tenants and landlords, but they do. They want to tick boxes and they want to get it done. So in terms of that, what's happening? Previously, the government would focus on those property transactions, say from a rental standpoint, that are over 10,000 euros, £8,500. And if you fell below that in terms of managing property, if you're a landlord who owned a property that was generating less income than that, then it wasn't really a big deal. It's still quite a bit of work for letting agents like ourselves, and you have to register, etc. But now they're saying it doesn't matter how much rent you bring in, it could be £100 a month. You're now going to be swept up in this whole AML net of scrutinizing your tenants. Where do they get the money from to pay the rent, to pay the deposit? Are they behaving suspiciously? Scrutinize your landlords. If you're taking a new landlord as a letting agent, you have to put them through the mill in terms of how did they fund the purchase? Are they asking for the money to pay it in a different account? And we receive quite a few overseas tenants, and sometimes friends pay their first month's rent until they establish a bank account in the UK. And it's all legitimate, and we do have some checks in place for that. But the admin now, because that has been incorporated within the AML, all our staff have to be retrained. We have to create brand new forms to prove that we've done the checks on individual tenants. We have to flag up any tenant or any landlord that has asked to pay in cash or have suggested that they'll take a property without seeing it and they'll book it in advance for 6 months, which, for international students, that happens quite a lot. So yet another piece of legislation that has been tightened for both self-managing landlords and for letting agents, which adds to the huge weight of admin that we have to now take on board and manage on a day-to-day basis. So I think this podcast is really just a check-in to see that time's a bit tough in terms of the outlook. It's uncertain. We're hoping for some rate cuts. We have new legislation coming in. We know the renters' rights. We've done podcasts on that before. And that's coming. There's a whole bunch of things which are on the way, some of which weren't as bad as we originally thought. Some of it is a little bit worrying because they don't seem to have their ducks in a row. For example, what happens when things go to court for Section 8, Section 21, we know is going. And in terms of extra notice that you're obliged to give to tenants, 3 months instead of 2 months, if they're in arrears, another cost for us. But that's coming. Whether we like it or not, that's on the way, and we should expect those changes in the middle of the year. We're altering our operation to reflect some of these changes, as all letting agents should be. Our anti-money laundering, we will be contacting all our landlords and say, prove who you are and where you live and how you set this company up if it's held in a company structure. And because we have to, and we need to hold that on file for at least 5 years. It's going to be a busy second quarter on the back of the anti-money laundering. I don't for one believe we have any tenants or landlords that are laundering monies in the UK, but with this government, you're guilty until you prove yourself innocent. It's a bit sad, but there you go. There you go. So that's really all I wanted to say.
We'll have a little bit of an update on the Renters' Rights Bill for our listeners. So the bill obviously started in the House of Commons, and that's when all of the sort of anti-landlord proposals, I guess, were put forward. But the bill then goes to the House of Lords for discussion and perhaps any changes or tweaks or to get their feedback on it. And it was the end of Feb that it went from sort of the Commons to the House of Lords. But the House of Lords had a few interesting comments. They released a paper, which I'll put the link in the podcast notes to the actual paper that was published by the House of Lords. But a few things that I wanted to comment on were the suggestion of Section 21 or the ban of Section 21 not applying to small landlords. And if you've got 5 properties or less, the Section 21 ban effectively doesn't apply. So we don't know if that's going to be pulled through or not, if they're going to agree to that or not. But that is almost kind of, for the majority of the landlords in the UK, means that the ban of Section 21 may not be so much of an issue that we thought it was.
And the thinking was on that so many landlords have been selling that they had to do something to prevent the selling, because if you sell all the rental properties, then the rent price is going to go up.
Absolutely. And I was looking on the English private landlord survey last year that 45% of landlords only own 1 property. And next 38% own between 2 and 4, and it's only 17% of UK landlords that own 5 or more. So effectively, a huge chunk, the majority, won't be affected by it. So that's a little bit of a positive in and among what's going on. The other thing and then for those that do own more than 5 properties, Section 21 will be delayed until the courts are ready, or that is the suggestion. So we know that the courts aren't ready for this now. It will be deferred until they're ready. So that should buy a few more years, I would have thought. So it's really important to track the detail of what's going on, because we see the headlines. And can you imagine that there's been landlords that have been selling their portfolios for fear that they're never going to be able to evict a tenant. And then all of a sudden, actually, that's not a rule that's going to come in, which is so naughty in terms of how the government are providing so much uncertainty to landlords, because you're trying to plan with information that you just don't really know if it's going to be the case. So the fixed tenancies are potentially back, because there was a suggestion that a tenant could move into a property and they could stay as long as they like, or they could leave whenever they like. But in the House of Lords, they're suggesting that you can't give notice for the first 4 months of moving into a property. Well, isn't that just a 6-month AST through the back door? Because that's exactly what happens at the moment on a 6-month AST. So it's important to look closely at what's happening, but we still await the final update, because it is still with the House of Lords. It hasn't got royal assent, and we don't know the final detail on it. They're kind of the more positives. On the slightly more negatives, the House of Lords have also suggested that when a tenant moves into a property, that they don't get a rent increase for 4 years, apart from a CPI-linked inflation increase. So as some landlords have been doing already, the fear of that straight away hikes rents for tenants on the way in, because they're not saying that you have to cap the rent at a certain amount for a tenant coming in, but once they're in, they only want an inflation-linked increase. Now, rents across the UK last year went up by 9%, but inflation on paper, well, depends at what point you're looking, but potentially only 2%. So that's obviously a huge difference. So again, not agreed, but just something out there that we need to be aware of. So rents will increase with tenants coming in as a way to protect ourselves. There are some landlords that actually don't even increase their rent year on year for tenants. So I guess the inflation linked increase could be a way just to consistently increase rents in line with your costs. But I just wanted to throw this in, that I don't think a lot of people are aware of how it's being debated through the Commons and through the House of Lords as it stands.
Okay, that's a good summary. Brilliant. One of the things that we haven't mentioned and we should do is EPCs. This government wants a change in the EPC minimum standard by 2030. I understand, and we have yet to fully investigate it, that there are some grants available for upgrading properties, subject to the income of the people living in the property. So a lower income would get a little bit more. But my understanding, the long and short of it, is that most landlords, subject to particular areas around the country, will be able to get a grant for upgrading their properties so it reaches that minimum C standard. I mean, we just went through quite a large property in terms of getting the C rating. And it wasn't your typical property, but it was a bit painful. Most of the properties in the country are as old as, 150 years. So that's always going to be a challenge. But apparently the grants are quite generous, anything from £10,000 to £15,000, I understand, which is the sort of number that was suggested that most landlords have to spend on their properties to upgrade in terms of boilers, insulation, windows.
And if you're a portfolio landlord, I think you can get up to a couple of 100,000.
Yeah. So that sounds interesting. So we're going to do a bit of a deep dive on that and do a separate podcast. We will be, along with this, presenting a digital podcast, which lays out all the details of what we're doing as a business for anti-money laundering. So that breaks it down for you, and the pros and the cons and the extra bits of information you'll have to provide if you're one of our landlords, and what we have to do as an agency in terms of vetting both new landlords and tenants. So that's probably worth a listen. Even if you're not one of our landlords and you're a self-manager, this is applicable to self-managing agents as well, landlords as well. So we'll post that in the next few days, and please give it a listen. So, I mean, that's really all from me. I mean, we've got to dig our heels in and knuckle down and do the best we can during these difficult times.
We've got a new job, haven't we, working for the government now?
Yeah, indeed.
We effectively work for the government.
Regardless of your politics, yes, we all work for them. That's not exactly a great side hustle, isn't it? Working for the government.
No, not at all. But like you say, we just dig our heels in and get on with it, and believe that the opportunity lies where people are not willing to do the work, where people are not willing to upgrade the knowledge and understand what's going on. As landlords leave the market, there's opportunities to buy. As letting agents potentially leave the market and think, sod this, we can't do this anymore, there's opportunities to buy letting agents, as an example. So we always got to focus on the positives and the opportunity, but at the same time not be blinded to all the stuff that is coming in to effectively trip us up, and if we're not on our A game.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant.
Good. All right, until next time.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode, and if so, please hit subscribe and share with those who you think would enjoy it too. To get in touch with Paul and Amanda directly, please visit their website www.essentialpropertyoptions.co.uk for more information. We look forward to sharing with you on the next episode.